This felt like you were on an alien planet. We're on an icebreaker in the Weddell Sea. Am I crazy? Are we all crazy for being on this boat? Film is the most powerful weapon in the world for social change.
In this sea of content that we have now at our disposal through streaming platforms, can environmental documentaries have the same impact?
This is the golden age of documentary filmmaking. Kids are watching a 1-minute TikTok. That's true, but it's also true they're starved for real content. I was the first new photographer that National Geographic hired in 1980. I started out wanting to use photographs, a collection of stories, to change the world. If I told you that plastics is in your brain right now and it's changing your cognitive abilities, your ability to procreate, your fertility, we know it's in the oceans, but we don't know en masse that it's in our bodies, it's affecting our children. There's not a lot that we can do right now.
Your film Race Extinction, you actually created a very effective social media platform, which I believe has millions and millions of followers. What can the average person do?
There's a wonderful maxim by Margaret Mead that said, never doubt that a few thoughtful citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that it ever has. And I think that's true. You just need to light up a few people.
Hi, Louie. Thanks so much for joining us.
Sure, pleasure.
Tell us a little bit about what you do and why you decided to join this expedition.
I run a small ocean organization called the Oceanic Preservation Society, and we make films and do photography to, with the hopes of inspiring people trying to change the world.
It's very humble of you because you're actually an Oscar-winning director as well. You've made several very notable films such as Game Changers, and I know you're working on a bunch of new films now. Are there any films that are loosely tied to the topics of climate change or anything that might be relevant to Antarctica?
Nothing about Antarctica. You say something like that, and I think, well, the hypocrisy of being an incredible boat like this, and being claiming to be a climate change activist. I mean, the irony, is not lost on me. But, this everything we do, I mean, this probably is not answering the question if you're trying to get at, but it's like, everything we do, you're basically spewing carbon dioxide and taking up oxygen. So, at the end of our lives, I think we have to look back, are we a net positive on the planet? It's just I wasn't expecting this level of luxury if I ever went down to, a place like this. Sitting at lunch today, and, our lunchmates is reading a book about Shackleton, and he was like in the spa when he was reading it virtually where near where the boat went down. And, there's an irony there. We're here at this incredible boat with, incredible people. And, I look at everything I do and, try to I'm thinking of overall, is it, I don't want it to be a wash. Hopefully we're making a more positive difference than if we were here, than if we weren't. And I think overall, I'm looking at my life. We can all write off this trip somehow with, carbon credits, plant trees, whatever. We know do something. We've done that for all of our films. I should say that for the first two films, as for the third and the fourth one, I just directed them. I didn't produce them. But, it's an issue, but I think, in my mind, I think, if the stats that I'm hearing are right on Game Changers, we're saving, tens of millions of animals from, life of suffering, plus all the, resulting climate change aspects of motivating people to not have, a meat-based diet. I think hopefully my life is becoming more of a net positive, but this boat certainly is, it's incredible, but also there's meeting people like yourself that might be able to finance a movie or, partly, or, maybe other people on the boat. The truth is, high net worth individuals are the people that keep my world going around. We're a non-profit organization at the end of our, the year, and that's the books are supposed to balance out to zero. And we need to meet people where they're at to get the work done. Because 70% of my energy is spent financing the work that we do. And as the truth is, most people that finance my work are, they have money. They're not the $5 and $10 donations. It's great when they happen, but that's not where most of our money comes from. So I go to events, I'm always networking, trying to figure out if there's somebody that, is a simpatico, that they're interested in doing what we do. Because it's difficult. It's difficult work. And, Sometimes you find them on boats. Sometimes you find them at a ocean conference. But usually they're people with wealth.
And you might find them on an iceberg during this trip.
This trip, I mean, it's been so spectacular. I mean, just beyond my wildest dreams. I really never thought. Yeah, but we're on an icebreaker, and the Weddell Sea, where Shackleton's boat went down. And, there's some days going through these ice flows, and where no commercial boat has been before. And I'm thinking, am I crazy? Are we all crazy for being on this boat? Because it doesn't look like normal to be going through these ice flows, crashing through them with propellers. I mean, I've run boats, and it's like, you try to avoid this stuff. We're crashing into them. I understand it's a Class 2 icebreaker, and, but it still feels like we're on a luxury boat, and it doesn't feel normal to be doing where we're, if this boat went down, I'm sure people look at, the minutes of the ways of like, well, of course, what were they thinking?
Well, what's amazing about this ship is that, of course, you don't really feel, you feel so comfortable, and you're almost separated from the extreme hostility of the landscape and temperatures outside. Do you think that it's inevitable because we're here on a cruise ship, but does that give us a false sense of security, a false sense of importance or power over nature?
I don't think importance is it. I'm always looking out the window and thinking this could go sideways pretty quick. I never, we're having dinner with these icebergs floating by. I'm always thinking, what was on the bridge? Is the captain up there? Is that the assistant? Is he looking where we're going? If you look to see the path where we're dodging through these icebergs, you think, well, which ones does he decide to hit? And which, obviously you stay away from the big ones, but sometimes they're packed so tightly. I think like, wow, that's just insane. I'm glad we survived it, but I don't know if I would, what I mean? I don't know what the level of safety was. I talked to some people that, were saying this, that Nico was saying, wow, this was dangerous. So the boats going where they didn't know they could go. Sometimes they were just making up where they were going because the flows are packed too tight. Not unlike probably the conversations that Shackleton had with his expedition. It's like, hey, this isn't what we thought. We should go somewhere else. And what happened to them?
Were there any standout experiences or landscapes for you?
Every day there was, I didn't want to. One of the tragedies of being on this trip is the sun never sets hardly. My son was asking me what are the stars like? Because so far it's like, I never saw stars. I never saw the only star I saw was the sun. Sun sets about midnight or 12:30, and it gets up at 2:30. So it just gets a little bit dark, and then it pops up at 2:30 in the morning. I just don't want to miss anything. Just out my window, every day there's this rotating landscapes of incredible beauty. There was that bay that with the triangular peaks that we went into, and it was like, to me, it was like a 3-hour video through a Ansel Adams landscape, but it was real and it's moving in front of you. And it's just like, the clouds with the sky, these unbelievable vast landscapes and just like alien. I was just, it was breathtaking.
Most people know you as one of the world's most famous environmental documentary filmmakers, but of course you started out as a photographer. So we saw you on the deck at all hours with your Phase 1 in Alpa. Tell us a little bit about the photography project you're working on.
Yeah, it's actually financed by a friend of mine, Jim Clark, the guy that financed the Cove. Jim Clark, for people who know, is kind of the Steve Jobs of our generation. Before Steve Jobs, he had 3 companies from scratch, that invented industries from scratch that became multi-billion-dollar industries. And was a normal guy. He's brilliant, absolutely brilliant and tenacious, but he's the guy that, and in a lot of ways he gave me not just the finances, but the inspiration to try to do something big and bold, because we were 10 years before we started working on the developing the Oceanic Preservation Society, and I saw that here's my best friend, and he's changing the world, and he does it. When you do it once, you could be lucky. Twice, it's like, oh, that's like lightning striking twice. But the third time with business, proves that it's not a fluke. There's a standard that he's discovered with business to change the world, and he led me into a window of how you do that with anything, and that's be tenacious, hire the best people you can, people that are smarter than you, and get them mission driven. Select the people that are mission driven so that they understand what you're doing, and try to bring forth the best version of each person on the team, so that it's not 1 + 1 is 2. It's like 100, and that's what if we're doing our job with film, that's what we're doing. It's like we start out with the premise of like, how can you change the world? And visual images to me are incredibly powerful. I think film is the most powerful weapon in the world for social change. To me, it started with photography. I was the first new photographer that National Geographic hired in 1980, and over a decade, about 11 years, was the previous photographer before me. And I started out wanting to use photographs, just single photographs, in a collection of stories to change the world. The first story I did for the Yellow magazine was a story on garbage and recycling. Back then there was only one mandatory recycling program in America. And I was 23 years old coming out of college, and I thought, we're throwing all this stuff away, like aluminum cans and glass. It was just, to me, it was insanity. And so I recommended that the magazine do a story on garbage and recycling. And this is back, 1981, I think, is when I recommended the story, and that's how I got hired. And that really began I don't know, let's say it helped certainly kick off the recycling movement, because there's some pretty good evidence that shows that you need 10% of the population 100% committed to create social change. And back then, Geographic, about 15% of America saw the magazine. 11 million subscribers, 4 people saw each magazine, 44 million people. Back then, about 15% of America, and that became part of a chorus of a lot of organizations and people working on this issue. But when you see one of the top mainstream magazines in the world doing a cover and whatever it was, 30 inside pages on that story, it started to create a water cooler conversation. And but that's how I started out in photography, just trying to use photography to change things.
How important is photography to you versus, say, making films, or what's the difference, maybe?
Photography and filmmaking is only similar in that, filmmaking is photography at 24 frames a second, but a really powerful frame, or, can change the world. But you have a much better chance when you have, when you're mixing still photographs, film with sound, with a great story. I think then you have a chance to change the world, because you can change the way people think, what they feel in their actions. That's the key, to use the most powerful weapon in the world, filmmaking, to change people, and not just give them information, but change the way they behave.
In this sea of content that we have now at our disposal through streaming platforms, can environmental documentaries have the same impact than, say, the Cove did back a decade or a decade and a half ago, when there was perhaps less choice out there?
Yeah, I think filmmaking, documentary filmmaking, is still more relevant than ever. I think in the last couple of years, I'd say 3 years or so, it's even since before the pandemic, this is the golden age of documentary filmmaking. There's more people watching it, there's more people making it than ever. So people say, oh, well, what about it? Kids are watching a 1 minute, 30-second TikTok. And I don't think that's true, but it's also true they're starved for real content. We'll binge a series that's, many hours long if it's good. So people shouldn't confuse meaningful content and TikTok. It's like you can do both, but I think it's hard to change somebody's life with a 30-second TikTok. You have a chance of doing it with a 90-minute documentary.
And of course, with your film Race Extinction, you actually created a very effective social media platform, which I believe has millions and millions of followers. How, in terms of the marketing mix and getting the message across, the film versus the actual social media platform, which is more effective?
We need both a great film and a marketing campaign or a social impact campaign. We work on them at the same time. We're doing one on plastic pollution solutions right now, and the impact campaign is working in lockstep with the filmmaking. We're always checking with the impact team and saying, this is where we think it's going to go, so that we're working together. So when the film comes out, we're prepared for those, hopefully millions of people that want to create change, so that they have the tools already built for them. So we're not going, oh God, what are we going to do with all these people? I want to know what to do. We're thinking about that at the same time we start the film.
And you mentioned plastic there, and obviously plastic pollution is one of the biggest threats to marine life, especially to the species in Antarctica, the whales, the cetaceans, right down to the bottom of the food chain, the krill. Have you got any thoughts or feedback on how we should change the way we do things to try and mitigate that?
I mean, it's going to be a longer answer, but I think it would be more meaningful. I don't think people are going to change what they drive because, let's say, the ice is melting in the northern polar regions. People don't care about polar bears. They care about them in like a transient kind of way, but they're not going to change their behavior because of it. But if I told you that plastics is in your brain right now, that the average adult, they say, eats about a credit card with the microplastics every week, and it's changing your cognitive abilities, you're changing your ability to procreate, to your fertility, it's changing your obesogens, it's flicking on the bad genes and turning off the good ones, and making us fatter as a culture, so that if you give, identical species of mice, the same amount of nutrients and exercise, but one gets microplastic at the same ratio that we have it, you can deform its progeny, you can make it fatter, and it flicks off the bad genes so that 4 generations of its progeny are also overweight. So the human health issue, and we know it's in the oceans, but we don't know en masse that it's in our bodies, it's affecting our children. And I think that's the big lever here to push. It's like, yeah, that's a problem out there, but we should be worrying about what's inside of us.
And how does the general public go about changing that? I mean, obviously no one wants to have plastic in their food or in their water. What can the average person do?
There's not a lot that we can do right now. Game Changers, which is a film I directed about plant-based lifestyle, super athletes that, basically that movie, that documentary makes the case that a human being, an athlete on a whole foods plant-based diet can be just as strong, if not stronger, can have just as much virility, it can have just as much endurance, or probably more, on a whole foods plant-based diet. When you see that film, you can just go to the grocery store and, you spend more time in the vegetable food aisle, and you'll live better. When you see the plastics film, we think there's no aisle really for avoiding microplastics. You can choose glass bottles over plastic, but generally,
it's everywhere.
This coat is shedding microfibers right now. That if you saw the sunlight pouring through here, it's kind of dusty. It's because the rug is made out of that, out of fossil fuels with plastic. And it's our clothes. When you go through and take out the lid, that's plastic. The cans that they pour of the Perrier here in the book, well, those are lined with plastic, and so that they're leaching out plastic as they're sitting on the shelves. It's everywhere. It's in the perfume. It's in the women's lipsticks. It's in sunscreen. It's the phthalates, the plasticizing chemicals are everywhere. You can make an informed decision to avoid a lot of that, but you can't avoid it completely. But what we can do with the film is create a constituency so that we can demand that corporations have more bioplastics and biobenign plastics that, they're still plastic feeling chemicals or products, but they don't leach into your body. And if they do, they're enough organic compounds so that they're not toxic to our bodies, like the ones coming from fossil fuels. And then we can inspire laws like they have in Europe that, in America, for instance, there's tens of thousands of chemicals out there that have been tested. And we demand that, like Europe, that we test them before they get into circulation from our bodies.
it's almost such an overwhelming issue. People can feel helpless sometimes, and the term eco-anxiety, quite prevalent now. It seems to be a lot of younger children feel helpless with this eco-anxiety. How do you deal with eco-anxiety? Because you're at the coalface of all these issues, and you know how serious they are.
Yeah. Well, when I was growing up, I was so pissed off the generation that was above me that were allowing, nuclear warheads pointed at each other. And I was like, why save money? Why bother to, we might be incinerated the next day. And that kind of hopelessness is like what I rebel against. And let me give you some ideas of like where I'm coming from. I had one of the first electric cars in Colorado, one of the first 3 electric cars in Colorado, a 2002 fully electric Toyota RAV, powered by 114 solar panels, before people had solar panels like they do today. And I thought I discovered the Holy Grail. But back then, I go to the environmental conferences and people would say, such niche, electric cars will never be able to scale. Alternative energy is just it's a good idea, but it's, less than 1% of 1% of the energy production. So you're, Pollyanna, great idea, but let's talk over here with the grown-ups. It's like, that was 20 years ago. Now you look what's going on, and Elon Musk, whatever you think about him, he's still the richest guy in the world, and he's, he changed the industry. Alternative energy like, wind and solar, depending on what region you're in, it's still cheaper than new installed gas or certainly coal. So these changes, these technological changes only take about 10 years. 15 years ago, we were punching the number 2 key 6 times on our flip phone to text a capital C. These changes happen really quick. And, my hope is that documentaries just put jumper cables on these issues so that we're talking, another 10 years can be like, God, that's amazing. We could change the plastic system or the way that we're getting our food. That's all happening. The game changers. Merrill Lynch did a study last December, about a year ago. They said that 75% of the interest worldwide in plant-based diet is because of that film, The Game Changers. So I'm very hopeful that, films and well-meaning people can change the world. There's a wonderful maxim by Margaret Mead who said, never doubt that a few thoughtful citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And I think that's true. It's just you just need to light up a few people, and they could be the lightning rods to a movement.
You mentioned game changers, and of course you're a vegan. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how important it is to be a vegan and why that's relevant to the climate crisis.
Being vegan is not just relevant to the climate crisis. It's for me right now, it's a way of life. I've been to the CAFOs, the confined animal feeding operations. I get down to North Carolina, southern North Carolina, where they have, 33 pigs for every human being down there. And I see what that does to the environment. It's the biggest cause of freshwater pollution down there. The raising animals for human consumption is 14.5% of greenhouse gases. It's responsible for most of our health problems. About 80 to 85% of the chronic diseases we have, like heart disease, diabetes, cancers, can be reversed at the early stages with a whole foods plant-based diet. So we know it's healthier for humans. It's healthier for the animals that are put in these awful places where they suffer from the moment that they're born to the moment that they're taken to the slaughterhouse. And it's better for the environment. So it's a win-win-win all the way across the board. So, I look at, I could be, hopeless about, what's going on, but I made a film about it, and it is changing the world. And my hope is that everything that I do from now on has, incremental hope that it is changing. If it changes one person, it's probably doing it to everybody that sees it a little bit, in different increments. So, it is possible to change the world. And I think that hopelessness is what we have to fight all the time, every day of our lives, because, every interaction that we have, every connection on the boat that we have, is a potential to do some positive good. So, and it's hard to operate from there. You know what I mean? Because I fall into despair too, but I have to remind myself where my roots are, is that, it is possible, and you have to keep on I have to keep on reminding myself that, with what the mission is. And the mission is, it sounds Pollyanna, sounds but it is noble. You know, I am trying to change the world with these films, and thank God I have enough data to show that I'm not crazy.
And you're absolutely right. You have all the data. Everyone knows about the issues. Why aren't more people being vegan? Why isn't it such an easy switch for most people?
Yeah, I think everybody has their own sort of narrative that they spin. They can see the Game Changers, and they can. You know, a lot of people say, "Oh, I saw the Game Changers. I was vegan. That was a great film. I was vegan for 2 months." And it's like, well, you know, sometimes they need to hit me. It's a little bit like advertising. Maybe people need to hear about it a few times. If you're young, if you're in your 20s or 30s, or even 40s, you think that you're going to live forever. But as you get older, what we're putting on our bodies shows more of an effect. And you know, that's why everybody on this boat probably knows a mate, a spouse, a mother, a father, a grandfather that has a chronic disease. And I'm always thinking, that's horrible, but maybe if they had a healthier diet to begin with, more of a whole foods, plant-based diet, they wouldn't be having to take all those drugs. They wouldn't have to be going to the hospital. They could be taking trips like this because they're not afraid of being away from their doctors. They can be with their grandkids a little bit longer. They can enjoy their lives. They're living life instead of, suffering through life at their end. But those are all choices we have. It tastes good. We're addicted to fats, sugar, and salt. It's also a social thing. We eat it because our neighbors are eating it. It's the same thing with electric cars. It used to be cool to have a big, Hummer SUV. And look what's, people are now getting the information that, there's a better alternative out there with electric cars and, certainly alternative energy. And, eventually, once you get to that 10% number, 10% of the population being 100% committed to a truth, that's the tipping point for social change. And at 30% with the population adhering to it, then other people are doing it because other people are doing it. And that's like when the movement, it's unstoppable at 10%, but at 30%, it's like, it's well on your way. And again, all I'm trying to do is put jumper cables on all these issues. And, what I can do is just do what I'm doing. We're working on another film for Netflix on food systems. And hopefully we'll reach another few tens of millions of people and start working on that movement. But, our taste buds are hard to change. It takes about 3 weeks to get off of the addiction to salt. It takes about 3 months for fat. So people are really addicted. In milk, people say, oh, I can't give up cheese, which comes from dairy. And that's because there's something in cheese called a casomorphine. It's actually a morphine-like substance, molecule that keeps the baby cow coming back to the mother. We have about 2.6 grams of casomorphine in mother's milk, human mother's milk. And cows, this order of magnitude, is even more with cheese. So when people say they're addicted to cheese, they really are. It makes them feel good, makes them feel warm and cuddly. But, how do you get all people off that? Maybe scare them into, showing, look at your mother. You want to end up like your mother or your father or your relatives that eat the same way that you do. And it's not your DNA, it's your dinner.
So on that point about the food systems and the film you're making, we work a lot in food tech. What are your thoughts on these new products, these new food products, which are essentially cell-based meats or plant-based meats such as Impossible Beyond, or the cell-based meats such as Good Meat? What's your take on that? Do you think they are good substitutes, or is it better that we all just switch to a vegan diet and a regenerative food system?
Well, I think, first of all, I've been working with some Stanford researchers that work on exactly that problem, at least like looking at Beyond Meat. And they've looked at the health differences between, Beyond Meat, plant-based alternative to, real meat. And it's incrementally better for human health and for the environment, they say. Now, cellular-based meat, I think, it's going to be better for the environment. It's going to be better for animals, a lot better for animals. And if they could, so for people that want to eat meat, it could be a great substitute to scale up. I've tried, let's say, a fish version. A friend of mine has a friend of mine has a tech company that does real salmon. And I ate it, and I was like, man, that tastes like what I remembered fish used to taste like. But then after I left, like for about 45 minutes later, I had this sort of metallic aftertaste in my mouth, and it'll get better, and for people that still want to do, eat meat and have it be a little bit more socially responsible, I think it's the way to go, for sure. I just know what it does health-wise. So I wouldn't do it as a matter of course. I just don't want to do that to my body. But I understand that there's people that really love the taste of meat. I don't love it anymore.
We've all been on this incredible expedition. It is the largest privately funded scientific expedition of its kind, and the first to mix scientific research and tourism. Do you think that model is sustainable, or can be, improved for the future? Where wealthy people are basically supporting scientific research and going back to carbon guilt and all the, the guilt that we feel about being on this ship. Do the positives outweigh the negatives of being down here?
I'll put it this way. This is not the first expedition boat I've been on. When my buddy Jim Clark, when he financed the Cove, he built a boat that was the world's largest private sailboat called Athena. Gorgeous boat. And I used it as an expedition boat. He let me use his boat even when he wasn't on it. So a lot of the Cove was shot on that boat. So you didn't see the boat. It wasn't really material to what we were doing, but almost all those early shots of dolphins and the wildlife stuff was done on Jim's boat. So yeah, it is possible to use a wealthy person's boat as an expedition boat. I think it's conflicting narrative now. It's much better to have, a boat like Cousteau's Calypso or something like that. But, I can't be picky. I can't afford to get down here by myself. This is expensive to do this kind of stuff. So if somebody else is flipping the bill for it, thank God he's here. Because I don't think I would have had a chance to do it myself. I want to come back. And I think, well, if I come back, I don't need to be on this boat. I'm glad I'm on this boat. But I think when you do an expedition like this, like for me, I would just hang out where the animals are. I would probably take a dinghy and I'd follow the killer whales all day long, not to sort of, it's all great. This is all a gift. And I think, there'll be some great science done on it. I think I'll have some amazing set of pictures that I couldn't have gotten any other way. So I'm happy to be included in this, but I'm also, in my mind, also think, okay, what's a better way to improve it? And I think that's the problem I had, the carryover from work with Jim Clark. It's like, how do you incrementally change things so you can increase your chances to have a better outcome or better chance of success? I think, well, come back down here, spend more time, or be on a boat that's dedicated only to expeditions. But like, everybody's happy to be here. We got to places that we couldn't get with any other boat. We're down there cracking ice, and there's no other, unless you're on another icebreaker, you're not going to get here. So, if the platform is an icebreaker with hammocks or an icebreaker with a spa, I guess I'd probably still choose this one. It was an amazing trip. It's incredible. I'm so grateful, so incredibly grateful for the opportunity to be here, because I've got to see places I never would have got to see otherwise. So I don't know. I mean, there's conflicts in life all the time, right? We're gonna be driving cars when maybe we should have walked or taken the bus, or, should we have, is that flight that we took, is that for pleasure? What's the carbon footprint of that? We're all hypocrites just because we're on this planet, and we're making choices every single day that are in conflict with the values of what it means to be living on the planet. But like, hopefully our life at the end of the day is going to be a net positive.
How has this trip and these places that you've visited, has it impacted you spiritually, but also in your thinking? Has it spurred you into wanting to do even more? How has it transformed you going back now to Argentina?
It's really rare to be, for 2 weeks, we never saw another person other than the person that was on the boat. You start to come back through the straits there, and you start to see another cruise ship or another expedition boat. But finding a wild place is almost impossible on planet Earth these days. You have to go to these far off regions. And I've never been to it. I mean, last time I was here in Antarctica was for 4 hours. It's another story. But, you know, I was at a field station, and so you're surrounded by other scientists and stuff. So it's, you know, it felt like a village. This felt like you were on an alien planet. There was nobody else around, and it was full of wildlife, and it was full of these landscapes that you could only imagine, like out of like Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit or something. You know, it doesn't feel like of this. And so it makes me realize it. And by the way, I haven't been to a landscape where you don't see plastic on the beaches. It may very well be there frozen in the ice somewhere, but you go to Europe, the beaches are littered with plastic bottles. And so it's hard to avoid not seeing it. But here, it still seems pretty protected, you know, maybe because of the currents or whatever, but this is a wild place. I mean, this is what the whole planet used to look like. And we've screwed up the northern part, you know, it makes me want to protect it more. You know, when you see the pristine beauty, you know, usually you know, when you're making a documentary film, you're trying to like find that one oasis where, you know, life erupts, you know, the sardine running off of Africa, or, you know, blue whales in Baja. You're trying to go to these remote regions where you know life is going to happen. But here it looks like it's happening almost everywhere. And it's like, it is the land before time. And yeah, we need to protect it, try to restore what's going on up there. It is possible, but boy, a lot of work to do.
Would you be interested in working on a film about Antarctica?
I don't know if I do a film about Antarctica, but I do definitely want to come back here. Mm-hmm. You know, there's another project I want to, like, after all these other projects are done, I want to do another project with cetaceans, with whales, dolphins, and I will definitely be coming back here. In fact, I talked to the crew this morning to see, like, okay, what else do they have coming down here again? Maybe not on this boat, but another one. I just want to see what's possible, because there's just so much to be done here. You know, like I said, when you go up north, you're always struggling to find like a really wild place, and here it's everywhere. It's hostile, right? I mean, we went out for a breath of fresh air at dinner last night, and you know, the wind is whipping. You know, where everybody's dancing inside. It's, you know, they're drinking and they're partying. It's New Year's Eve, they're cheering, and you know, we just went outside to remind us where we were, and a couple of us sat out there for like maybe 30 seconds. The wind was whipping and the sea spray's coming up, and it's just frigid cold. You know? So inside you have like the most unbelievable, you know, experience of warmth and, you know, friendly cheer, and out there you have Arctic death. Here, Antarctic death. And you think, God, it's like 1 foot in the grave and 1 foot in life. And it's like you're sort of caught in this weird world where, you know, you can happily ignore it, but like just over there, you know, you fall in the water, and, you know, if somebody doesn't see you, you're gone. It's all over.
And I guess that's the paradox of human progress, right? We as humans have the technology to come down here in total comfort in a totally hostile environment, but our technology is too much. We're overpowering nature. We're producing all these toxins and not looking after the planet. That's the paradigm, is that we have to somehow reduce the impact of our technology. But it is a reminder of how advanced we can be, but also a reminder of how far we have yet to go. I don't know if that was clear, but I mean, I guess that sums up the sort of paradigm of human technology versus us being too dominant over nature.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I'm glad we went where we went, you know, and I think the boat is, my understanding is it's running on natural gas. Just seems like it's a lot. It's a new boat. It's, you know, they thought about it, the environment, and, you know, when they built it. But yeah, it is, you know, we don't have to be down here. You know, Greta Thunberg would probably be, you know, screaming at us. But on the other hand, you know, when you do what I do, you need other people. You need to mix in the places with other scientists. And God, it was so, I mean, it wasn't just like a pleasure craft. It wasn't like just a luxury icebreaker. You know, it's full of scientists. So you could be literally I remember at one point I was on the observation deck, and I was talking to Alex, you know, the host, and we had this, we were talking about penguins, and then Pete came up, you know, one of the world's experts on penguins, and we just had a penguin with, well, let's ask Pete. He's right here. It was like, you know, or anybody working on climate change. It was like a lot of some of the top people in the world working for the best academic institutions were here on the boat, and there was something wonderful to be here on the boats with them while they're doing studies, and taking DNA from penguins and doing acidification tests of lakes that people hadn't done before, so we can get baseline. I mean, this is how science done. It's kind of a cliche, but you have to, it's a bad analogy for a vegan, but you have to crack a few eggs if you want to make an omelet. We are trying to change the world. It's going to cost some carbon dioxide. In recent Extinction, I say that one of the worst things you can do to the environment is make a film about it. But again, hopefully the net positive is going to way overpower the cost of it. I mean, it's the same thing with any new industry, with electric cars or computers. You look at in my mind is always like, how do you? It's not how do you avoid answer the question, but how do you reframe the question so that you're looking at what do you try? How's this helping you achieve what you're trying to do? Yeah, we're burning a lot of carbon dioxide here to get here, but like in my mind, if I spin this off to become part of a book that I'm working on, if the scientists are getting baseline studies because they're an icebreaker that they couldn't get to with their with the projects that they're doing, and that inspires. There's a lot of young researchers here on the boat with us. Maybe they're going to be the next generation. They're not going to be down here in a luxury icebreaker, but they're going to be slogging on another boat, living in hammocks, and but it'll inspire the next generation. I'm sure of that. But as you're sitting here living in the moment, it's hard to see what's the next step. But I can see it. I can see that that's how it works with the film. One person sees it, but there's another 10 people you don't see, or another 100 people, then another 10,000, a million, and all of a sudden people are coming up to you all over the place saying your film changed my life. Well, I think this voyage is like that. It's like that. Ian Forster talks about every voyage starts with the first step, and this might be the first step for a lot of scientists. A lot of certainly for me working down here, I would love to, like I said, come back. Maybe not do something in the Antarctic, but be part of another project. So I was one of my breakfast mates was a woman working on seeds. It's like she's planting seeds. That's what he's doing. Alex is doing. For the first time I sat with him last night at dinner, and we've been down here for 2 weeks. And the first time I really sat down with him, and picked his brain about what he's trying to do down here. And I mean, I think it's incredibly noble. He put a lot of thought into how not just the friends and family he brought down, but like what kind of science, serious science can he do to make this voyage feel like there's something being done. And when Nico came to him with the proposals on which of these 5 projects he thought Alex should finance, Alex said all of them. And he thought he was joking, so it took a couple of weeks till he realized that he was serious. So we have all, he has all 5 groups of scientists working on these different divisions, like plankton, climate, penguins, cetaceans, etc. But it's pretty damn noble.
Fantastic. Just a final wrap up. Top 3 tips for any budding documentary filmmaker or someone who wants to make change in the world.
Do what you're doing. Keep it minimal, expensive, so you can go out and really push some boundaries. You don't need a lot of money to do it. Find something you're really passionate about doing. I mean, that everybody says that, but it's really true, because to suffer through all the problems, you have to be mission driven and be passionate about what you're doing. Because if you don't love what you're doing, it's gonna be, you're gonna be waking up and with all the obstacles that there's a million of them every day. No exaggeration. There's hundreds every week obstacles that prevent you from doing what you need to do. But if you're mission driven, you'll get through it. You're not going to think, oh, well, I'm running out of money. This is too hard. I'm too tired, whatever. Mission driven, then, there's not enough hours of the day instead of like, what time is it? Top 3 things: keep it cheap, be passionate, and don't lose hope, because, it's that dream, you have to architect the future. And I think making documentaries are one great way to do it.
Thank you so much, Lou. That was really great.